Well, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know it is such a busy world that I never take for granted when you take time out of that busy schedule to join us here. And I try and make sure I bring you really great content. And today is definitely no exception. Today we're going to be talking with Chris Livezey about the shortcut to magnificence. And we could all use that, right? Negotiating with your mind to rewrite your life. You can see why I wanted Chris here. That is so much in alignment with the art of feminine negotiation. So, welcome, Chris. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and share some magnificence with all your listeners.
We can never have enough magnificence in our life. So, I'm
That's
looking
right.
forward to I got my pad and pen ready to take notes myself.
And nowadays, people are looking for the shortcut, so it's a good fit.
Oh, well, nowadays people are particularly looking for magnificent. There just seems to be so much negativity in the world. So, and for those of you who may not know Chris, he's the author of Shortcut to Magnificence. And it's a book that blends neuroscience, universal laws, personal transformation, and decades of self-study to create what he calls a blueprint for magnificence. So go get your laptops, your pad, your pens, whatever you use to take note. And his book shares 13 principles for creating a magnificent life, rooted in imagination, desire, faith, mindset, mentorship, health, and the power of understanding your own paradigm. And Chris is on a mission to help people break free from those limiting beliefs that hold us often back in our lives so that you can expand your potential, create a life for yourself that reflects who you really are and not what your environment taught you to be. And so today we're going to be diving into that internal negotiation, that probably one of the most important negotiations that so often gets overlooked, that mindset, so we can rewire to tap into our personal power and what it really takes to escape that old programming to step into your magnificence. So, Chris, you have definitely lived a story that most people would never imagine, from being arrested at 15 to discovering a different way, I guess, of thinking about yourself and your future. Can you share with us, or is there that sort of first moment when you realized that you could rewrite your own story?
I think that came in when I was in ninth grade, when I was first given a book by my father that was written by Zig Ziglar
Oh,
called
yeah.
See You at the Top. And you said it, like when I was 15 back in 1999, I had, I was a troubled teen, headed down the wrong path, was arrested. And that's kind of what led my father to giving me this book. And it was in this book that there was a story that just resonated with me so much. And it was about a little boy who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy
Wow.
from 30 different specialists. And all 30 specialists had told this little boy's parents, and this little boy was only around 2 at the time, but they told this little boy's parents that for the good of the normal members of the family, they should put him in an institution. But then it was this one doctor who really embedded into the mind of this little boy's parents that if you go to work on this boy's mind and really push him beyond all human endurance, both physically and mentally, there's hope for him. So, of course, his parents rejected the ideas of 30 different specialists, went to work on this little
Wow.
boy's mind and body, hired a physical fitness trainer, and really just went to work. And after 2 long years, the boy was able to do a couple push-ups, changed his life around. Fast forward years later, he was already skating on the neighborhood hockey team, doing
Wow.
as many as 1,100 push-ups in a single day, and doing extremely well in ninth grade math as a seventh grader. Now,
Yeah.
see, at this time, I'm in ninth grade, and I'm thinking, how on earth could 30 different specialists get it
All
wrong?
wrong. Yeah.
And I'm like, and I'm thinking now I had the counselors, the teachers, and therapists, saying that I was a behavior adolescent. There was no hope for me. I got diagnosed with ADD, pulled out of mainstream classes, put in emotional support classes.
Yeah.
But once I read that story, it gave me hope and it gave me
Yeah.
belief in myself because I felt like if this little boy could change his life around with cerebral palsy, well, he
Yeah.
had far worse conditions than what I
Yeah.
did. So I could also change my life around. And I went out and I ended up buying the cassette tape at the time back in 1999. We still had tape.
Yeah. We're dating
You
ourselves
know?
here, Chris.
And I didn't know what I was doing, but I kept listening to the tape over and over every night before bed when I got up before school in the morning, and I was rewiring my subconscious
Yeah.
mind. And remarkably, I was able to work my way out of emotional support classes. I stopped taking the Ritalin that I was prescribed for ADD. I made the honor rolls, varsity baseball team, wrestling team. And that's actually when I discovered the power of the human mind. And I had the opportunity to give my first motivational speech to the entire school.
Yeah. We grossly underestimate, and we're not taught about the power of the mind. I mean, it's probably
Right.
our most significant tool, if you will. And we don't, and hats off to your dad giving you Zig Ziglar at a young age. That's awesome. Now, you talk about negotiating like with your own paradigm, right? That subconscious programming that you were just referring to, right? That we
Yep.
getting drilled and how it's shaped by our environment, like, 30 specialists and or your school telling you you need to be in an emotional support class. So how do you explain a paradigm to someone who's never thought about it, which may be some of our listeners?
So a paradigm is basically controlling our daily results, and it's a sum total of the beliefs. It's our belief system. And our belief system is based on our environmental heredity. So the people, places, and things that have been coming into our life from the time we were first born. So a good example of that is if you had two babies and one baby was taught five languages, they wouldn't know the difference between the baby that is just being taught how to speak the English language. You could teach a baby five languages just as easy as you're going to teach them the
Yeah.
first, because the subconscious mind in the baby is wide open, can't differentiate between what's real, what's imaginary, and just accepts everything in the mind. So what's happening to us from when we first come into this world is we often are, born into the family that we're born in. We don't choose the food that we eat. We don't really get a chance to choose our religion or even our financial literacy.
Yeah.
For instance, if we're born in a household that only makes $50,000 a year and our dream is we want to become a millionaire, the first thing we do is say we'd like to become a millionaire. And then our parents say, well, people like us aren't that
Yeah.
fortunate.
Yeah.
That's what's shaping our paradigm. It's the sum total of the beliefs that have been taught to us over our lifetime.
Yeah, that's a great explanation, by the way. Thank you. And I mean, you've already alluded in answer to the first question about how your paradigm was shaped by, and thank you for being so open and transparent, by the way, but
Yeah.
that your paradigm was shaped a bit by, trauma or at least labels and conditioning and clearly low expectations. So what were some of those early internal negotiations like when you decided, I'm going to break free from all of that?
Well, it's once I understood that we have some power in the mind here. So if we can embed the information that aligns with the life that we want, we can change our paradigm. We can change our results in our life by understanding where we currently are, how our mind has been programmed. And then the most important thing is writing down a list of everything you want in life. What are the results that you really want to achieve in your lifetime? And then start surrounding yourself with information that aligns with that belief. That's what it's through the repetition of that new information
Yeah.
that's going to reprogram our subconscious mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, when you were talking about that, it's not for people like us. I think we do often grow up, especially, and I grew up in a low income family in a low rental apartment complex, and there is that sort of locking in. You see it of, I think I was the first kid in our extended family, probably in our community to even go to post-secondary. And I think we do expect like that kind of those magnificent lifestyles are for other people or, quote unquote, special people. Why do you believe that people underestimate our own potential? Because I think most of us do.
I mean, that's because it's this information. This is what I became so obsessed over because the information isn't being taught to us.
Yeah.
We're taught facts and how to memorize things, which make us either smart or dumb,
Yeah.
according to society, basically, how much we know. But
Yeah.
really, nobody's teaching us about how to use the intellectual faculties of our mind,
Yeah.
what our mind is, and the difference between our conscious and subconscious section of the mind. And that's what's controlling us on a daily basis. That's what's controlling our results, our relationships, our business, how much money we make, but yet it wasn't being taught anywhere. And that's what made me so fascinated with this information because I realized that had I become a victim of other people's opinions and beliefs, I would have ended up a loser.
Yeah.
But by reprogramming my mind, I was able to transfer my life. And all I wanted to do is teach this to everybody else. And I couldn't figure out why this wasn't being taught out in society.
Yeah. And still not. I mean, even with all the
So
knowledge, it's amazing. And, our brains try to give us what it thinks we want. And when we keep telling those same negative stories to ourselves, our brain goes out looking for examples of where that's true. And you can always find that because we're not perfect. But equally, the opposite is true. If we start telling our brain about our magnificence, it will look for examples of that. Now,
yeah.
in your book, you walk through, as I said in the intro, I think it's 13 principles of magnificence. So if you had to choose just one principle that changes everything first, which one would it be and why? if it even
Well,
works that way.
the principles are like baking a cake. So to have the whole cake, you need all the principles to live
Yeah.
magnificently.
Yeah.
But the most important principle is the first principle where I talk about faith and spirituality
Yeah.
and how to develop enough faith within yourself to achieve anything you want in life by understanding the spiritual side to our personality.
Yeah.
And that's where I come up with a diagram of the mind because most people don't know what their mind looks like.
Yeah.
And as humans, we think in pictures. So without having a clear picture of what the mind is,
Yeah.
it's hard to be able to understand even what I'm saying now between the conscious and subconscious section of the mind. And see, this is like the most powerful information you're ever going to learn because it can control your results and everything about your life. And then once you understand it, this is the battle that goes on in your mind. This is your mind negotiating with itself every day because it always wants to go back to the paradigm. You
Yes.
have to focus on rewiring your paradigm, which resides in the subconscious section of the mind. But
Yeah.
without that picture and understanding the first principle, it's hard for people to really, grasp what I'm saying and take control over their own life. But with a clear picture of how the mind works and the difference between the conscious and subconscious section of the mind, that's going to allow you to have more faith within yourself to achieve whatever you want in
Yeah.
life.
And I love that take control over your own life because it's amazing how quickly we revert back to those old stories, those old paradigms that we've been conditioned. And one of the things that struck me, I know one of your core themes is imagination, and it totally resonated with me because I really believe, as children, we were innately great negotiators in so many ways, and from that imagination, and yet it gets a little beaten out of us as we go through life. And I think adults forget how powerful it is. So maybe can you share how imagination played a role in shifting the direction of your life?
Yeah, well, our imagination is one of our six intellectual faculties, and I believe it's the most marvelous, miraculous, magnificent gift that we've been given at the time of our birth. It's the workshop to creating our dreams. And see, like what you said, we start losing our imagination at an early age because we go into school, the teacher says, "What is everybody, just in kindergarten, 5 years old, what does everybody want to be when they get older?" One student says, "I want to be a teacher." Another student says, "I want to be a police officer." And then a student says, "I'd like to be a rock star in the greatest band in the world." And the teacher says, "Okay, now, Chris, let's be more realistic. What would
Yes.
you really want to be?" And
Yeah.
see, you're getting pulled away from using your imagination.
Yeah.
But the key is you got to figure out what it is you want, go inside your imagination, and that's the workshop to putting the pieces together to obtain the life that you want to have.
Yeah, I love that you refer to it as a workshop. I think that single shift, even seeing your brain as a workshop and your imagination as a workshop, is a powerful shift. Now,
Well, let me tell you, here's a little exercise that I do where I go in my imagination a lot. If I'm in a difficult situation in business or something, or I'm stuck on an idea, I will close my eyes and go in my imagination, and I have like a conference table with my past mentors who might not be with us any longer.
yeah,
Napoleon Hill, Wayne Dyer, Bob Proctor,
yeah,
Zig Ziglar, they're all sitting at this conference table, and I'll sit there in my imagination and I'll go around the table and ask them, "What would you do in this situation?" I
mm,
got this exercise from my mentor, Bob Proctor, but
yeah.
I'll tell you, that's the power of the imagination because when you can do that, somehow through our intuition, we're given the answers.
Yeah, at the conference room, that's clever because it gives it a little seriousness, right? A little more import as we do, so our brains more likely to take it seriously. Now
And
you,
see, as a kid, you're taught that you always have imaginary friends. So
yeah,
as you get older, it's good to have sometimes imaginary mentors and just to
yeah,
think like, how would they look at it from their perception? I know these are some of the greatest people that ever lived that are my mentors. So
yeah.
if I'm facing a difficult situation, I just go in my little imaginary conference room and I ask my mentors, and somehow I'm always given the guidance I need to work through
Yeah.
that situation.
What a beautiful concept because you're then free to choose the most powerful sort of team members, if you will, in the world and throughout history, so it's awesome.
Well, you choose your team members that align with what you're trying to do in life.
Yeah. Now you've mentioned so many iconic sort of mentors, if you will. What is one lesson from your mentors that you would say still guides you every day?
I mean, I'm going to go back to the first principle in my book because, from the time when I first started studying the mind in Zig Ziglar, that was 1999.
Yeah,
And from 1999 to 2011, I made some incredible changes. I ended up leaving high school halfway through my senior year,
yeah,
started my own business by 21, got into real estate, became very successful as a real estate investor.
yeah,
But it wasn't until 2011 when I was being coached by Bob Proctor when he first introduced me to the picture of the mind. And once I understood the mind and I saw this picture, Bob calls it the stick figure, and I wrote about it in my book. But basically, it's the top part of your head is your conscious mind. The lower part of your head would be the subconscious mind. And it's through the thoughts that we think on a regular basis that we become emotionalized to. That's what's creating our paradigm. And once I understood this after Bob Proctor taught me, that's when I knew how I changed, how little David Logic changed, the story about the boy with
yeah,
cerebral palsy,
yeah.
and really how I could teach anyone how to achieve the life that they want.
Yeah, yeah, so powerful. Now, your story includes, if you're comfortable sharing it, an intense moment in rehab where you had a confrontation with a therapist who sort of triggered a shift in your sense of self. Are you comfortable sharing with our
Yeah, absolutely.
what happened and
So
why you think it was such a turning point?
December 26, 1998, the day after Christmas, I find myself in the backseat of a police car on the way to juvenile or getting arrested because I was selling my prescription drugs that were prescribed to me by the doctors because I didn't want to take them anyway. So that's what led me to, I always had an entrepreneurial
Yeah,
mindset.
clearly.
Luckily, I didn't go down that path,
Yeah.
but I ended up because I was only 15, I was put on probation and they thought I was going to, be a troubled teen and they ended up sending me to a rehab. And
Yeah.
I was the youngest person in the rehab at the time. And I'm 15 years old, so most of the other kids were 17 and
Yeah.
18, maybe a couple of 16-year-olds in there. And there was this huge therapist. I mean, big guy. He's probably
Yeah.
6'7", very heavy set guy. And I remember everyone was scared of him. And we were doing this group therapy session, and he pointed me out of the crowd and really just started to attack me verbally.
Yeah.
But in a way that, like, what it did is it got me to believe in myself because he was putting me down, saying if I continued down that path, I was going to end up dead. My family was going to be ashamed of me. I was only going to hurt my family. Just a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
triggered me to all of a sudden, I think it was the first time I really became a man out of that boyish stage because I jumped up on my seat, stood eye to eye with them, and I said, Harris, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm not this way. And that was really the sudden point
Wow.
in my life that caused me to change my life.
Yeah.
And then I was able to work my way out of the rehab, ended up going into a group home, smooth sailing due to good behavior. After 6 months, they let me go back to my middle school. That's when my father gave me the book by
Yeah.
Zig Ziglar.
Okay, wow. Great story. Now, you talk a lot about environment as well, right? And again, I think it's one of those things we underestimate, but how our surroundings, expectations, the influences shape who we believe ourselves to be. And we talked a bit about that earlier. So, how can someone begin? So, if we've got listeners out there now, as I'm sure there are, who are saying, hey, that's me. How can I begin to change that environment when I'm feeling stuck? What would be that first step they could take?
The big thing, take out a blank piece of paper, write down the top 10 things that you want most in life. Use your imagination. Don't think there's nothing that you can't have in this list. Write down the top 10 things that you want most. What would make you happier, healthier, and wealthier? And then you want to find people who are already successful at doing the things that you want to do and immediately start following those people, buy their books, follow them on social media, watch their YouTube, listen to their podcasts,
Yeah,
because slowly what you're doing, it's based on repetition.
yeah,
Through the repetition of a new belief, you're going to change your paradigm. And see, our conscious mind is our intellectual mind, more of our thinking mind. We have the ability to accept or reject any information that comes into it. So, where our subconscious mind cannot differentiate between what's real or what's imaginary and must accept anything that puts into it.
yeah.
So what's important about that is if there's something that we want on this list and we share it with somebody that doesn't believe that we could do it, we have the ability to reject that idea from somebody else and program our mind with the information that does align with it. And that's the most important lesson, really. It's figuring out what it is you really want, write it down on a piece of paper, find people who are already doing it, and then tune out everything else that doesn't align with it and only follow those people. Do it for 30 to 90 days. It's going
Yeah.
to transform your life.
Yeah. I want to take a second for our listeners, just really breathe that in. Let yourself hear what Chris just said, because I think so often we're conditioned, whether based on our class, our economic situations or gender or any number of other factors. And we are so conditioned to stay small, stay in your lane, stay in that. So, I think you hear Chris here challenging you, inviting you think big, like take the lid off that box about what your potential life can be and allow yourself to believe in it, because if you keep telling that to your subconscious, as Chris said, your subconscious isn't going to know the difference between fact, and your brain will be trying to give you what you want. So I love that. Now
Yeah, and it's really the
yeah,
most important because, and I tell people this, like, I was not a smart guy. This is why I'm so obsessed with teaching this to
yeah,
people. I would have fallen a victim of other people's beliefs. I would have been a loser. I ended up leaving high school. Everybody said I couldn't be successful. But what I did is I wanted to get started in real estate investing. I found people who were
yeah,
already successful at investing in real estate, and I followed those people. By 25 years old, I turned my income from 30, $40,000 a year to over 300,000, accumulated over $1 million. And most of my friends who did go to college quit their jobs to come work for me. This
yeah,
is this is why I'm telling people, like, there was nothing special about me. It was the fact that I understood, I knew what I wanted, and I conditioned my mind with the information and people that aligned with that dream. And that's how I was able to achieve success.
yeah.
So it doesn't matter who you are, where you're listening from, what your background or circumstances may be. The moment you figure out what you want and condition your mind with information that aligns with it, you're going to achieve it.
Yeah. And would that be your strongest, the thing that you most want people to know who are maybe struggling with self-doubt, old conditioning, or fear of dreaming too big? Would that be the secret sauce that you would say right there? Or
Yeah, get yourself a mentor.
yeah.
Anybody, a mentor that aligns with what you're trying to do, and then have that so you have an accountability partner. And here's the thing, once you understand how your mind works, every day is a negotiation so you don't go back on your old way
Yes.
of thinking. So
Yeah.
you got to constantly be putting information in your mind that really helps you stay on the track of
Yeah.
achieving the things you want in life.
And let's talk about desire for a minute. I know you refer to it as the fuel for all creation, which I love. So how can, well, I was going to say women, but not, how can anybody, how can our listeners reconnect to desire when life has conditioned them to suppress it? And you were talking even as kids saying, I want to be a rock star, and being told, oh, let's get realistic. So what advice do you have?
Well, desire equals the speed of implementation.
Hmm.
And most of the time we're thinking, like, if I look at a small desire, say you want an ice cream cone for the day. Well, that's a desire. It's a burning desire and it's easy to obtain. So you just go out and buy yourself an ice cream cone. But what if you wanted to become a millionaire? Now all of a sudden, and you've never made $1 million before,
Yeah.
you instantly go into your subconscious mind, well, that's impossible. But you got to build up the same amount of desire to wanting to become a millionaire as you would want to obtain that ice cream cone. That's the difference between just a small time desire and a real burning desire, like Napoleon Hill outlines in his book, Think and Grow Rich, having a burning desire for what you want most in life.
Yeah. Thank you for the reminder as well, because I think sometimes with our desires, we can start letting them slide again as we reach a certain level of success. Because, as I say, I grew up in that low rental, and you know, I wasn't aware of it, but I had a burning desire for more, right? More respect, more space than our little apartment for all of us, and that. And so I achieved and I achieved, and I just had this unshakable belief. And then when all of a sudden I'd achieved a level that was I wouldn't have imagined before, I think if I'm really honest, things kind of slid back a little bit, and it's having to recapture that desire again. What is it we really want? So for our listeners, whatever stage you're at, whether this is the beginning of a journey or whether you've had some success and maybe now you're coasting a little bit, I think it's such an important message for you to rekindle that desire. And as I'm saying that, it strikes me, I mean, there are always the naysayers. It's not just when we're kids being told not to be a rock star. I think, there's obstacles. You've got those naysayers, you've got all these outside opinions that then become part of our subconscious programming. So what advice do you have for how can we protect ourselves and those dreams, those desires in the early stages before people really fully believe in themselves?
To protect yourself is becoming more aware of your mind because there's no protection, there's no shield. If you get home from work and you turn the news on, you're getting bombarded with negative stuff
Yeah.
and stuff that's going to steer you off course. So it's really, being able to understand how your mind works and understand that you can reject other people's opinions or advice simply by not tying emotion to it. It's the thought plus emotion that's creating the real paradigm. So it's okay to have negative thoughts. And, if people try to steer you off course or they don't believe in you, don't tie an emotion to it. Simply go to a piece of paper of the result that you want or how you want to be supportive and think over and over about that thought.
Yeah.
Don't tie your emotion to a negative thought that doesn't align with you.
And can you explain that a little more just for people who don't like at a practical level? And I totally agree with you, but just for our listeners, what do you mean when you say attaching an emotion to it? Can you give us an example of that?
So say I want to start a business. So when I left high school, everybody I had a plan. Now I don't advise if anybody's listening, they're in high school to drop out of school. The only thing that was different is I knew what I wanted. I
Yeah.
put together a plan and I found, mentors that could help get me there. But here's the negative part. Most of the people that were negative in my life at that time with what I wanted were the closest people to me.
Yeah.
They were my friends, they were my family, even my own parents didn't support me
Yeah.
because they didn't understand real estate and what I was trying to do. They just assumed that if I left high school, I was going to be a loser.
Yeah.
Now, what I understood is I didn't want to tie the emotion to that belief of what they thought about me.
Yeah.
I found people who were successful, who never went to college, who were very successful in real estate. And I just followed those people. So I would listen to what other people said, even the people that love you. And this is the negotiation that you're always in
Yeah.
every day because once you know what you want, you get all excited about it and you start sharing it with the people that are closest to you. More times than often, it's the people closest to you that aren't going to support you the way that you want. And that's when you got to reject those opinions of other people and program your mind with the information that does align with it and only listen to that. Because as soon as you start tying the emotion to what other people around you believe, you become a victim then of your environmental heredity.
Yeah. I am so glad you went there because it's such an important piece of the puzzle. And for our listeners out there, for everybody I know who's really succeeded has had that same experience, right? Where it's the
Yeah.
people closest to them. And especially if it's a shift, right? And even for myself, I built a successful law practice for years, sort of against all odds. And then when I shifted to doing around women on purpose and the art of feminine negotiation, the least support I got was from the people closest to me. And even still today, I mean, they don't promote the books, they don't share, the programming and that, and the support comes from others. So for our listeners, don't let yourself be surprised or disappointed by that. And no, it's not necessarily malicious. Yes, there will be some people in your life who maybe are jealous or trying, but most of the people who are close to you are probably inundating you with negative messaging with the best of intentions, misguided, but thinking that they're
Right.
keeping you safe. Oh, I don't want little Johnny to fail, right? I don't want the dreams to be shattered. So, as Chris is saying, find those people who are succeeding in the areas that you want. Get yourself mentors who are going to believe and empower you to step into a different version of yourself. So I'm so glad I asked for the example and that you keyed in on that point, Chris, because I think it's so important. Now,
Well, and
what,
that's always the
yeah,
hardest battle that you're going with because often people die with their dreams in them, not because they're
yes,
not capable or magnificent of achieving them, but because they let the advice and beliefs of other people control their future and their results. And
yes,
that's why I'm so passionate about this because I know there's so many people out there that would benefit from this and transform their life to live a magnificent life if they just understood how their mind works and they don't fall so emotionally attached to things that don't align with what they want. Like if you're told that, you're not a smart person, most people start, for young students, they start dwelling on that idea and then they
yes,
leave that type of life.
yeah,
If you're an adult, it's the same thing as an adult. We're always being controlled by other people's beliefs. So once we understand how the mind works, we can reject other people's beliefs and really achieve what we want in life.
yeah. Well, as funny as you said that, it just resonated too. I remember distinctly in grade two, for the first time, I won one of those little stupid, they probably don't have them anymore. I'm dating myself, but little academic award, like a little tabby thing that you could put on that. I'd never thought of myself as smart before, and suddenly it changed. And I felt bad. And for the other people, you could see it was like suddenly these lines were being drawn, and at that very young age, our definitions, our sense of self, and what we could achieve was being formed. So such
Mm.
a powerful point. And we've talked a lot about sort of those big dreams and that, but I wonder, what does magnificence look like to you in daily practice? Like not necessarily the big dreams, although they're important, but even in the small choices, Chris.
I mean, I always think it's being in a state of mind of happiness, good health, and financially secure. You don't have to be super wealthy. I know a lot of people that make millions of dollars and they're very miserable.
Yeah.
I know some people that are doing what they love and they make $50,000 a year and they're more happy than
Yeah.
the person making a couple $1 million doing what they don't. So
Yeah.
I think it's always being in a state of mind of happiness, health, and wealth. If you can get those three areas if you grading yourself from a 1 to a 10, where do you rank in those three areas of happiness, health, and
Yeah.
wealth? And are you doing it? And that's where you want your life to really be on the path
Yeah.
to living that magnificent life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And and I love the order you put them in, by the way. I've noticed that every time you've mentioned that, you put it in that sort of that happiness, health, and then the financial, right? Because that financial doesn't matter if you don't have the happiness and if you don't have the health. So being able to, and including in that happiness and that health, be thinking about your growth, like actively, what are things I'm doing to continue to grow in my life, right? What am I doing to stay on mission in my life, things that fill me up, and who am I surrounding myself and my environment, all of those as factors to be considering, those small choices you can make to be able to stay happier and healthier and ultimately financially. And I know sadly we don't have time to go through, all 13 principles, but if you could quickly talk to us about some of the other key principles to your model.
So the other one is that like my second principle is thoughts and feelings, where I talk about the law of attraction, the law of vibration, which is similar to what we've been talking about here, because it's really the first two principles that are controlling everything in your life. So it's understanding that you can't have one without the other. Like the movie in The Secret talked a lot about the law of attraction.
Yeah.
But it's really about thinking the thought and having the emotion tied to the thought and thinking that on a regular basis. It's through the repetition of the thought and the feeling that's going to create your reality.
Yeah.
A big one is working out. I feel like too many people don't have a regular workout routine. I've been consistently working out for 26 years straight, and it's changed my life. And I know anytime I'm experiencing some type of struggle, I can just go to the gym, and as soon as I hit that 14-minute mark on the treadmill or any type of cardio, the
Yeah.
endorphins start flowing, serotonin level rises, and you have more clarity over the
Yeah.
problem. You're able to think better. So I think, fitness is also a big part to being magnificent. You could have all the money in the world, but if you have bad health, you're not going to get too far.
Yeah. And the opposite is also true. When we don't work out, when we don't take care of our physical, we are sluggish, not just physically, but our mind gets more sluggish and muddled. So such a great point. And I
Yeah.
love going back to your second point about that law of attraction. I know a lot of people sort of poo-poo or see it as woo-woo, but the science is catching up to that. And our reality is determined by our thoughts and the meaning that we attach to them. And that's, at the core of everything Chris has been saying as well, to get more intentional about your thoughts and the meanings that you're attaching to those thoughts so that you can live your greatest life. So, we're going to have you back. There's just so much ground we didn't get a chance to cover here. I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? It can be part of your magnificence, but it can just be a simple aha moment that changed things for you.
I mean, I probably already went over that because the biggest thing was understanding the mind back in
Yeah.
2011. So once I was able to have a picture of the mind, which is what Bob Proctor showed me, which I wrote about in the book so everybody
Yeah.
could have a picture of it, that was a total game changer. That's what gave me the ability to really know that throughout my life, all I have to do is write down a goal, and I know I'm going to get that goal done no matter what it is. Because
Yeah.
I understood the mind and I understood that once I write it down, I build like a daily affirmation around it. And I just tell myself that every day until I achieve it.
Yeah. And for our listeners, think about the power of that, right? And Chris just said that so casually, right? I know that I'm gonna write down a goal and I'm gonna be able to achieve that, right? That the power of that certainty to be able to live into your dreams. Where can people
Well,
learn
look,
more?
let me just add one thing. It's like
Absolutely.
Einstein said, everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency to the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. Now, through my studying and understanding the subconscious section of the mind, every thought we have has a frequency. And as we think about a thought over and over again and tie an emotion to it, that's what's causing our bodies to go in that vibrational state.
Yeah.
And that's what we're sending out to the universe. So I know this gets a little scientific, and some people think it's wishful thinking. But if it wasn't for this being true, I wouldn't have been able to transfer my life around as many times as I have in different areas through getting into real estate as a high school dropout to becoming an author and even transforming my life around back in ninth grade.
Yeah.
So I want the listeners to really understand that, like, your mind is the most powerful gift that you've been given. And too many people don't really take the time to think about what they really want. And that's the starting point. It's really knowing what you want out of life and then writing that down and surrounding yourself with information and people that can help bring that into your reality.
And Chris, your message, this is so timely now and again, for our listeners, I challenge you to look in your life where maybe you're letting yourself disengage your mind, right? We are getting so much pressure from large corporate interests that are dumbing us down, right? Just sit on that TV, just push this button. Don't think for yourself. Let AI do everything for you now instead. So respect your mind, hone your mind and take control of your mind so that you can live your life more intentionally, negotiate your life with intention. So I love that. Where can people learn more about you, Chris?
They can go right to my website at chrislivezey.com. It's ChrisLivezey.com.
Yeah. And Chris and I were talking just very briefly before we came on. And if it's easier for you to remember, just think live easy.
Exactly. I help
Because
people live easy.
because it's Live live and then ZEY. But if you take the live LIV and the easy live easy, it'll be an easy way to remember. And we'll make sure to have all that info in the show notes. So don't panic if you're doing something or in transit right now and can't get it down. Come back, check out the show notes. And
And I'll
Chris,
tell you what I do for any of your listeners. If you go to the website and go to my coaching program, fill out the form, I'll give any of the listeners a free 30-minute consultant call on just where you are in life and where you want to start headed into the future, especially going into 2026. A
yeah.
free 30-minute consultant call.
Okay, and for our listeners, I say this when somebody offers you something of value, take advantage of it. Don't get yourself caught up in something. So Chris is generously offering to give you a personalized consultation to kickstart your ability to live into your magnificence. I invite you, take advantage of that. And Chris, thank you so much again for being vulnerable, for the work that you do out there, and for sharing your insights with us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Cindy. I appreciate you having me. It was
And
great.
and for our listeners, there's so much value in here. Make sure, again, if you're distracted while you're listening today, come on back, listen to the episode again. And as always, I encourage you, give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with other people because who could not benefit from living into their magnificence? So definitely get out there and share that message. And before we sign off, if this episode maybe lit a fire in you, made you recognize you're playing a little smaller than you ought to be, and that you're ready to stop playing small and start negotiating a bigger life for yourself, feel free to come and check out my programs, whether it's one-on-one, powerful group, or through my online programs. I've got you covered. So tap into that feminine power of yours and start getting more of what you want and deserve and without apology. And if that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com. And for goodness sake, if you haven't grabbed a copy of my book yet, my book, same name, The Art of Feminine Negotiation. It will help you negotiate your best life. And that's a wrap for this episode. So now go renegotiate your life or the life that you maybe thought you had to settle for. And remember that every moment is a negotiation, starting with negotiating with yourself, which we've talked about today. So choose presence, choose power, and choose purpose in every one of those moments. And I like to think of this not so much as a podcast, as a movement. And you can choose to be a part of that. Together we can redefine power, one conversation, one negotiation at a time. So join the movement and lead the change. And lead it with heart, negotiating like the powerful force of nature that you are. Because remember that feminine doesn't mean weak. When it's used properly, it means unstoppable. So until next time, take care.